Good evening. Australia has been politicized when it comes to treating people seeking asylum and refugees. And I have been the victim of two countries' harsh policies. Afghanistan, where I was born. At the age of 17, I had to leave Afghanistan because of my ethnicity, the conflict in Afghanistan. As you would know, Afghanistan has been in conflict for over 40 years. War after war, persecution after persecution, persecution of ethnic minorities, religious minorities, and now women. You will be persecuted differently, or you will be treated differently if you have particular gender. In 2025, and the world is silent, watching what the Taliban, the same group of people that were after my family, or treating their own citizens, their own people, their own girls, their own women. If you're a woman in Afghanistan, if you're a girl, you're not allowed to go to school, you're not allowed to go to university, you're not allowed to work. Your life stops at your gender because you're a woman. And that's where I'm a country from. My experience is not an isolated one. If you're from Afghanistan, you will have experienced severe human rights violation, either due to your ethnicity or your religious belief or your gender. And that's unfortunately my country, a country that I want to see to thrive, respect human rights, and live in harmony. But that's not happening, despite the world has tried in a way to bring peace, unity, and freedom in Afghanistan. And yet, it's failed. At the age of 17, I was forced to leave Afghanistan because myself and my family was at risk of being persecuted by the Taliban, a regime that controls my country now under harsh condition for my people. I'm from the Hazara community, from the Hazara people. The hardship didn't stop there. I was smuggled through different countries. I was smuggled at the age of 17 to India, and then to Malaysia, and then to Australia on a boat. So I'm a boat arrival. I was happy that I arrived in a country that, or I was rescued from a country that prides itself of respecting human rights on international stages, and prides itself of giving protection to those who are in need of protection. And it's a proud country that prides itself of drafting the UN Refugee Rights Convention in relation to providing protection to those who are coming on our shore. But yet, the asylum policy has changed in 2012 at the month of August, which I wasn't aware, and I was rescued by the Australian Navy from the sea in November of 2012. Upon arrival at Christmas Island, I was put into detention behind the wall in a jail-like environment. The first thing I was told that I was not welcome to this country and that I will be deported to Nauru or PNG, or I'll be deported to back where I came from. I'm sure that slogan is familiar to a lot of Australians. However, I was detained on Christmas Island for a month, and then I was transferred to another island, which I was afraid that it could be Nauru or Manus Island or another country. But I was very lucky that I was transferred in Tasmania. The first question we asked there wasn't an immigration officer from the security guards, is Tasmania part of Australia? The response we got was yes, but we still weren't sure. And we didn't have access to the internet, so we still were a bit suspicious that we'll be sent to another country and potentially will be deported to Afghanistan, a country that I fled persecution. Luckily, when we landed in Tasmania, we saw Australian people with Australian security guards and all that, and we asked the question, is this Australia? And the response was yes. That gave us some relief because, as we know, Nauru and PNG has a reputation of not respecting human rights, but also treating refugees and people seeking asylum in the harshest way possible. So I was very lucky and fortunate that I was in Australia, but again, in detention center for about 2 months. Again, it was pure luck. I was released in the community. The first question I was asked was if I had any family or friends in Australia. I said no, because I had no friends and families in Australia, and I didn't speak English. Somehow, the immigration figured out to put me in Sydney on a bridging visa. So the next day, I was on a plane flying to Sydney, and I was put into a motel with no support or very limited support, and I was told that I had this accommodation for 6 months. The only thing I had with me was $100 that was left over from my trip to Australia. And I had to survive on that money for 6 weeks. And I was told if I don't find the accommodation, the amount of money we're getting from Centrelink will go towards the rent, and we won't have any money to survive. That was okay, but the hard thing that we found out was that our visa condition was not allowed us to work in Australia. So we're on a bridging visa with no work right. But also, we didn't have access to formal education, for example, learning English or going to school or going to university, build a life that I always wanted as a Hazara man or a Hazara young man in Afghanistan. So what was shocking for me was living in Australia, a Western country, which values human rights and in campaign for education and equality, yet excluding me because the way I arrived in this country from the mainstream society. So I was not allowed to work. I was not allowed to have access to education. As a young 17 years old man, I was sitting in my room and I was thinking to myself, what life do I want to live? My mother and my family paid a huge price to send me to a safe country. And yet, I'm living in Sydney in a small room with no access to education and no work right. And my future is a dilemma, because I was told the immigration is working to create more room in Nauru and PNG to send me as soon as they find a space. And that condition lasted for over 3 years. No work right, no access to education. But I didn't stop. My life didn't stop there. What I did, I reached out to different community organizations to volunteer because I was not allowed to work officially. And through that volunteering, I found the opportunity to get a scholarship from a private college. I studied English for 3 months, and then I moved on to college, did 2 diplomas. I wanted to go to university, but because of my visa condition, that hope was just remain a hope. However, one thing that I did throughout my times in Australia, volunteering, campaigning, advocacy. These 3 things were against my visa condition. I was strictly told by the immigration, if I speak out, if I tell the community or speak to media, if I work, my visa will get cancelled and I'll be detained indefinitely in one of the Australian immigration detention centres. And we know Australia has detained people over 10 years of not doing anything wrong, but seeking asylum in this country. But I didn't remain silent. So I spoke out, and I have campaigned for the past 10 years for a policy change. This is a photo of me proudly, after COVID-19 restriction, took 5,000 Hazara men and women to Parliament in Canberra, advocating for a change. Because what I was seeing is day in, day out, these policies harming my community. The community of people seeking asylum, the Hazara community. Our country was handed over to Taliban by the West, and these men who sought asylum in Australia couldn't get their families out because of the Australian refugee and harsh asylum policies. The fight continued. The 5,000 Hazara men and women went to Canberra after COVID-19, and we changed the policy. When Labor came to government, the first thing they changed was converting people on temporary protection visa to permanent protection visa, which allowed us to live like a human being, have the basic human rights of calling Australia home, having our families here, but also to live with dignity and be part of a community that wanted us, but our politicians and our asylum policy never was in favor of people seeking asylum and refugees. And this story is not just my story. And this policy was not just changed because someone like me stood up against the harsh policies. It's a story of the Australian community, because Australians believe in fairness and human rights. It's the politicians and mainstream media who drive the current and have been driving the asylum policies for the past 20 years. My story is the story of thousands and thousands of asylum seekers, ones who are at the risk of persecution in their home country and try to find a safe country, not just for themselves, but for their families and their children for generations to come. And this story is a story of Australians that believes in human rights, dignity, and fairness. I didn't make this policy happen. It's Australian. It's the refugee sector who are actively campaigning. It's the individual who go out on the street every day campaigning against the harsh policy of asylum seekers and refugees. It's lawyers in the room, organizations like RACS, who work tirelessly for a change and makes it happen. So I've been with RACS from 2013 as an ambassador, and I am today. And I couldn't make what I am today, an Australian citizen, from someone who was detained in Christmas Island to an Australian citizen today. So my message is never give up on hope. We all have the power to make a difference. It's the only thing that kept me going in the past 13 years is when I walk to an Australian person telling them who I am, and they keep telling me things will change. They're not just saying by words, they're taking action, either by calling their politicians, going out on rallies, or talking to their local MPs. So thank you for being here today. Change will come, it will happen, it takes time, but we should never allow politicians and mainstream media to divide us. Thank you.